Summer routines live or die by how easy they are. And honestly, if something takes too much effort, I'm out. That's why Groons is my go-to. It's my one daily pack of gummies covering my greens, vitamins, and minerals. Plus, it has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber, which is more than 2 cups of broccoli. No mixing powders, no giant pills, no hassle. I just rip open the pack and I'm done. They taste good and they make it easy to stay on top of my health, even when life gets busy. Save up to 52% with the code PODCAST at Groons.co. That's code PODCAST at GRUNS.co.
Lots of interesting topics to get to with Michael Russo here on TalkNorth.com. This is the Russo Hockey Show. Thanks to our sponsors, Grey Duck Vodka, still winning awards, and Tony Hoagland, your State Farm agent in Champlin. Please follow us on Twitter at TalkNorthPod. Please subscribe at your favorite podcast app. That's the best way to listen. And we have new Gopher Hole content out and new outdoors content, as well as the ongoing sports shows. So you can subscribe to the whole network and be entertained all day. And thanks to our producer, Brandon Morton. Let's get to this. You had a conversation with Dean Evison recently, Michael, and I know somebody else asked about this as well on Twitter. The longer this drags out, does it increase the chances that Dean Evison remains the head coach of the Minnesota Wild?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on that are probably as convoluted as everything I always say. I mean, you do think that the longer this to start off, Bill Guerin has again reconfirmed to me for the umpteenth time that he has definitely not started the coaching search. That he just thinks it's the wrong message. That he would want to meet with people face to face, not via Zoom. And that to me, there's a lot of time. And really, according to Pierre LeBrun's sources at The Athletic and TSN, the only team that really has started their coaching search of the 6 or so teams that are looking for coaches, and the one Detroit team that's probably going to fire their coach is New Jersey. And New Jersey doesn't even right now, and Tom Fitzgerald, have a full-time GM. Right now, he's technically an interim GM. But he's at least taking advantage of this time, while Bill Guerin just thinks it's the wrong message, that his whole goal, and he really does believe that there's a chance that the NHL, and there's a motivation that the NHL will return this summer, and that Dean is the coach. So now let's just say that the Wild play in July and they make whatever form of the playoffs there is, and they play into August, and the Cup's not awarded till September, and all of a sudden they're potentially, let's say the draft doesn't happen in June, which is right now something the NHL has at least thrown out as a trial balloon. If there's a draft, if there's free agency, if there's potential trades and a real truncated offseason, and the next season and training camp starts in late October, November, whatever it's going to be, you would just think that there's only so much that a GM could do in that short amount of time, that maybe if Dean continues to prove himself and the Wild come back and somehow play well, that he would be the guy. There are a couple of ththings that I think that Dean has really going for him. One is his relationship, and they're kind of related. One is his relationship with the players. You could just tell that, I said it to him yesterday on another podcast that I hosted him on, that you could see the fun banter that he has a lot of, especially with the young guys, like Cunnin and Greenway, that there's a lot of respect level for him. And a lot of times the assistant coach has that role because you work more individually with players and you become almost tighter with them in that capacity. And that seems to have translated now that Dean is in the head spot. And the other one is Fiala. And I know, I asked Bill Guerin this, and I quoted him in my article on Monday or Tuesday, whenever that was, or Wednesday. I can't even, whatever the date, what day is today?
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, whatever day. I talked to him on Tuesday, but it was in my Wednesday story on Dean. And I asked Billy point blank if because Kevin Fiala is so integral to this team, and he took off really. Now to be fair, again, Kevin Fiala started to play really well under Bruce Boudreau before Dean even took over. It was a 5-week stretch where Fiala was turning into a star. and Dean was the coach for 3 weeks. So, to be fair, this started before Dean. But once Dean really increased the ice time and put him in every situation, he really looked like an absolute game breaker. And so that is absolutely critical. Like, I don't know this to be true, but I don't think that there was that type of relationship with, say, another coaching candidate that coached Kevin Fiala in Nashville, and that's Peter Laviolette. So right away, would that almost eliminate Peter Laviolette as a candidate and really elevate a guy like Dean Evason, who we know has this relationship and this willingness to deploy Kevin Fiala in this fashion, knowing that Fiala is such an important piece to this team in the future. Now, every coach could come in here, even Laviolette, who maybe didn't have that relationship or that ability to get the best out of him in Nashville. And maybe that'll change because Kevin Fiala is a different player, a more mature player, and that any coach is going to see him and say, this is the guy I got to really ride. But I do think that really helps Dean Evason's cause just because of how important Kevin Fiala is to the future if he continues to play as well as he had played really for a lot of this season. So I do think that those things really, really bode well in his case. Like if you're going to have Dean, let's just say you have a couple camps. You have the veteran NHL coaches that are available, like Gerard Gallant, Peter Laviolette, Mike Babcock, even though he's an assistant right now in Detroit, Dan Bylsma. And then you have the next category of like Dean Evason, and then you have the next category of AHL coaches like Tim Army, or is it Vellucci, or I forget his name, the Wilkes-Barre coach that actually coincidentally, let me Google it real quick, that coincidentally Bill Guerin hired in Wilkes-Barre but never really got to coach him. But hang on. And then you have the college coaches, Mike Vellucci. And then you have the here's something strange. So I Google Mike Vellucci and the name pops up, and the picture of Mike Vellucci, just what are the chances, is Brian Hunter, the Wild scout. Like there's a problem with Google. Anyway, I just think that's hilarious. Unless Vellucci looks exactly like Brian Hunter. Regardless, and so you have that category. Then you have, say, the college coaches like Scott Sandlin, Tony Granato, Mike Hastings. Are you going to take a chance on them when you have the kind of known quantity here in Dean Evason? Are you going to take a chance on, say, even Tim Army or Mike Vellucci, your AHL category, when you know that Dean Evason's already kind of embedded here, knows the system, knows the players, has a relationship with the players? So that, to me, leaves now the NHL pedigree. And I think Peter Laviolette, he's got an expiration date that seems to expire. He's a great coach and has won and cups and everything, but he's got an expiration date. He eventually seems to wear on guys as much as good of a coach as he is. And you could probably say that about any former NHL coach that's currently available. But I currently think it's kind of going to go down as like Dean Evason versus Gerard Gallant is your possibility as being the next coach of the Wild. I really do at this point.
I'd keep Evason.
It was a long way to answer that, but
well,
but when you break it down that way, I just don't know. Are you going to really take a chance on a college coach or an unproven AHL coach when you have Evason sitting in that seat right now? And by the way, 12 games ago, I didn't think that we'd be talking like this. I really did think that Dean Evason was a placeholder. But the Wild went 8-4 under him, and mostly, got to themselves to being a point where they looked like they were really building to playing a great brand of hockey, or a consistent brand of hockey. And then you have Fiala, obviously, at this point, Jim, looking like a potential budding star.
Yeah, I think it's an easy decision. Who knows what isn't the mind of Guerin and Leopold, but I think it's an easy decision to keep, and it'll be interesting to see what they do. Hey, I do want to say, offer this message from Grey Duck Vodka, our top sponsor. Grey Duck Vodka is a proud partner of the Russo Suhan Show and is and I'm going to read it in the Grey Duck voice, and we're missing sports just as much as everybody else. We're very grateful to be Minnesota's vodka, and recently Grey Duck won double gold and best in show for taste in the Denver International Spirits Competition. While we wait with everyone to return to bars, restaurants, and sports, we want to thank all of you for buying Grey Duck for your drinks at home and for Keep the Duck in and supporting local business. I've had Grey Duck Vodka. It is sweet. I'm not surprised they won a bunch of awards. Please support them as a great Minnesota company. It is Minnesota's vodka. Do you want to go to Twitter questions or even
By the way,
new?
a gray duck voice would have been an impersonation or impression of a duck, and I didn't get that from you. So if you want to start over and do that actually in a gray duck voice, I'd be willing to listen. I know Brandon would.
That was my gray duck voice. I'm just not very good at.
Let's see. I'm going to Google right now. Since I'm online, I'm going to go Daffy Duck impression. Let's see what this what it could potentially sound like.
You know, Brandon, I don't even need to be here. Russo could just do a show where he just Googles stuff.
Can you hear this? Is this coming through the speaker or no? Is it not?
Not really.
Okay. Darn it. Well, that was a Daffy Duck impression on YouTube.
It was fascinating.
If you can master that,
I would go so far as to say it was hilarious.
Yeah, I think you should master it for next week's show.
I'll work on that.
You just need like a little lisp, a higher voice, and then you got it.
Like I said, I have nothing better to do than other than work on that. And you keep Googling weird stuff, Michael. I'm sure nobody will ever find your. As long as you just remember at the end of every day, Michael, delete your computer cache.
I don't know if I've ever done that, so I never remember my password, so I don't want to delete any cache. I got like 50 passwords on different sites, so
I was raised Catholic, so I think deleting your computer cache is the same thing as confession. You just got to do it right before you die.
By the way, I think it's pronounced cache. Shouldn't it be?
Cache. Close enough. Google it. I don't know, Michael. Google it.
Some cache.
Hey, Twitter questions from our friend Alec. What are the best free agent goalies that would fit the Wild?
Well, I mean, again, a lot of this is prefaced by it depends on what Billy Guerin thinks is the either timetable for Kaapo Kähkönen to become a number one in the NHL, or if he is the goalie of the future. If Billy thinks he's the goalie of the future, but a couple years away still, can you sign one of these free agent goalies to a 1 or 2 year deal when most unrestricted free agent goalies are looking for a home run? Like, in other words, like Markstrom, who didn't have a great year for Vancouver, is technically an unrestricted free agent right now, but he's in his 30s. He's going to want a long-term deal. He's not going to just sign here for 1 and 2 years unless he has no other options. So while that would be a great option, is he going to sign for that short? Robin Lehner is another one that pops in my head. He might be somebody that you can sign for a year or two. Or if you think the Kähkönen is ready or a year away, and I personally don't think that Billy thinks that he is ready to step in right now and be the number one, then maybe Lehner makes some sense. Or maybe you just have to come back with Dubnyk and Stalock and then come back with that type of situation. So, there are some free agent goalies out there. There's no doubt about it. It's just whether or not are they better than Dubnyk or Stalock if you're just buying more time for Kähkönen. And then, not only that, or if you think they're better, it doesn't, than Dubnyk or Stalock. It's just, can you sign them to a short-term deal? Because it would be a big shame to sign a number one goalie or an unrestricted free agent goalie to a 3-year deal, and all of a sudden now you block out Kähkönen for those 3 years. And then you create really a logjam below you. With guys like Robson, Kähkönen, Hunter Jones, those type of players.
From Family Dining, he asked about Evison. I think we already got to that, but good question from Tyler Scott off the top. This is an interesting one. Actually, before we get to this one, because baseball is contemplating, one of the many plans baseball has come up with is put teams in Arizona, Texas, and Florida play in the domed stadiums, as many games as you can in the domed stadiums in those states, and find a way to function that way, or at least start the season that way. Tyler Scott basically asked the same question. Is there any kind of a similar plan for the NHL? Before we get to that, I do want to thank Tony Hoagland, HOAGLUND, your State Farm agent in Champlin. He handles my insurance. He handles Michael's insurance.
Every team knows that the two-point play can be a winning move. That's why State Farm agent Tony Hoagland and his team are here to help you go for two by combining your home and auto insurance. It's a great call that saves you time and money. So go for the win and score savings by combining your home and auto. It's just another way we're here to help life go right. Call State Farm agent Tony Hoagland at 763-421-4900 or online at champlininsurance.com.
So what do you think? Is there any plan?
Well, first of all, I'm reading Tyler Scott's question. Yeah. He says, off the top of your head, what are your 4 or 5 cities you think the NHL is looking into, and what will it be like to covering games from home? Before I answer the first question, from the second question, I will say this. If Minnesota, well, I think it makes sense to have, if Minnesota hosts a bunch of teams, that Minnesota would be here. The league has kind of made clear that even if your home team, your home market is picked as one of the 3 or 4 team markets that they're choosing to put potentially 7 or 8 teams in, that not necessarily that Minnesota would be here. So in other words, if Minnesota is chosen, the Central teams, if they're grouped together, would not necessarily be in Minnesota. Potentially, they could be in Edmonton, Columbus. I don't think that makes a ton of sense because
it makes no sense.
Yeah, it makes zero sense because if you're going to be at XL Energy Center, Trio Rink, why wouldn't you want that team to have the run of their home locker room? Unless the league is looking at it like that's almost gives the Minnesota Wild an unfair advantage over other teams that are going to have to use makeshift locker rooms at, say, Braemar or Tria or, the Super Rink in Blaine or St. Thomas Academy or whatever, Ritter. So that would be my only thinking of why they would even float out the fact that even if your team was chosen as your market was chosen as one of the markets to host a bunch of teams, that technically you wouldn't necessarily be there. That would be to me the only reason, is if they felt that gave the Wild, say, an unfair advantage. The other thing that has been not explained to me is how, if they really want to finish the regular season, but how would you do that? If you have the Central Division teams grouped in one area, are you redoing the schedules for each of those teams? I mean, just look at the Wild's last 13 games this year. They were supposed to play Vegas, who's not in the Central. They're supposed to play at Philly, who's not in the Central. Then Nashville, Chicago, Winnipeg, Colorado. But then they were supposed to play home against Jersey, home against Buffalo, and then at St. Louis, at Islanders, at Washington, at Nashville. So Islanders and Washington not in the Central. Buffalo and New Jersey not in the Central. Also a couple cupcakes there. Like, I was looking at the Carolina Hurricanes schedule, and they have a couple games left against Buffalo and Ottawa. Well, all of a sudden, if you have a new schedule, are you not getting to play those cupcake teams while other teams in the other division that weren't supposed to play those teams are suddenly playing those teams? So from an integrity standpoint, I just don't know how the league plans to set all that up. Regardless, to get back to Tyler's question, I'm doing a big project right now that will run either later today on The Athletic or Saturday or Sunday on The Athletic. It's basically done. We just got to write the lead with Joe Smith, our Tampa Bay Lightning writer, and Craig Morgan, our Arizona Coyotes writer. And what we did is we took, as I reported earlier this week, the league has essentially eliminated the possibility of about 2/3 of the NHL markets of being markets that could potentially host 7 or 8 teams. And what they're doing is they're keeping about 1/3 of the league still in it, while they're actively vetting markets like Minnesota. And the reason why they want to keep, say, 10 teams or 12 teams as a potential is just in case they want Minnesota, but all of a sudden in July, Minnesota becomes a COVID hotbed. So right now, the teams that look like the front runners, if everything was going to start right now, would be Toronto, who, as we know, has hosted World Cups before, has multiple practice rinks, has an arena in the whatever it's called now, but I'll just call it the Air Canada Center. I know it's not that anymore. I think it's called Rogers or something now. That's an arena that they've figured out a way to have multiple teams in before at 2 different World Cups in the past. That you have Columbus. The reason why Columbus makes sense is you have a practice facility attached to the arena. You have 4 locker rooms in the arena. And I know all these numbers because I've been working on this project the last 2 days. And you have 12 full rinks in the area. 2 at Nationwide, the practice rink and the main rink. 2 at Ohio State, the men's team and the women's team. And then 8 other subsidiary rinks around the sort of area. Then you have Minnesota. The reason why Minnesota makes sense, world-class arena in the XL Energy Center. You have one of the most spacious visitors rooms in the NHL, and you have the home locker room, and then you have 2 other full locker rooms in there. So the reason why that is important is that if there's a triple header going on each day, and you have 3 games going on, while the first game is going on, you're going to need 2 other teams to move into the arena and have to have a place that's going to have a place that they're going to be able to move into. And then what's very important about Minnesota is you have the Tria Rink, where you have 2 locker rooms on the ice level, then obviously the Minnesota Wild locker room. And what's also important about Tria Rink is that if you have to potentially, from a medical standpoint, be able to care for seven teams worth of players in your market for a long, long stretch. So Tria Rink has Tria Orthopedics in there in the actual facility. Plus, you have obviously Tria down in Bloomington and Tria in Woodbury as well. So 3 Tria orthopedic centers within a 15-minute drive of XL Energy Center. Then obviously, if you're going to have this isn't so much important while there are games going on, because while there are games going on, if there's 3 games per day, there's only 2 other teams really practicing. But they are most likely going to have 3 weeks worth of training camps before games start in each of the markets they choose. So you need multiple rinks in that standpoint. So again, you have St. Thomas Academy, you have Tria Rink, you have Braemar, who's got, frankly, the Edina High School boys and girls teams' locker rooms are better than a lot of NHL rinks. You have the Ritter Arena, where you have obviously an NHL sheet, but you also have locker rooms and a tunnel that'll get you to Mariucci, where you don't have to go outside. And then you have technically the Super Rink in Blaine has 8 sheets of ice and a world-class fitness center. And then you have incredible hotels, between the Intercontinental and the St. Paul Hotel in St. Paul, then all the gazillion high-end hotels in Minneapolis. And we know as well that the Twin Cities have hosted huge events before, between the X Games and the Super Bowl and the Frozen Four and the Final Four. The other market that looks like a guarantee right now is Edmonton. And the reason why is sort of the same reason. You have a world-class arena. You have a practice facility that's attached to the arena. You have a skyway that gets to the JW Marriott, where you can literally probably host all 7 or 8 teams in the Pacific Division. So those are kind of the top tier teams. The other teams that I would call middle tier that have a chance are teams like Pittsburgh, Dallas, Vancouver would be one, but if you're going to put one in Edmonton, probably not. Even Denver, and then there are the teams that kind of make no sense. And then again, we're just eliminating in our project that's going to run later today or on Saturday. We're just eliminating from a possibility all the Northeast teams, all the California teams, teams in areas that right now are COVID hotbeds. But the criteria is that the league is vetting all these teams on multiple criteria. But the most important criteria at the time will be: is it a COVID hotbed? How is the NHL arena suitable? What's the medical like? Is there an NBA team that potentially shares the facility just in case the NBA doesn't decide to go to one neutral site, whether it's Vegas or LA? So that would right away, if say the NBA doesn't have playoffs in Vegas or LA, that would probably take away Dallas, because there could be a potential conflict with, say, the Mavericks, who would be in the playoffs. Again, outside arenas, outside practice rinks, suitable hotels. Those are kind of the big criteria that the league's looking at. And again, all this could be for naught. I mean, right now, I think for all of us, it's hard to envision a way that they're going to be able to play hockey. I mean, this is a physical game. This is a game where they check each other, sweat on each other, bleed on each other, bump into each other, spit on each other. You have a sport where you're sitting right next to each other on a bench. You're taking multi-towels on the bench and wiping sweat and perspiration off and evaporation off your face shields. You're hugging each other after goal celebrations. You're sharing locker rooms right next to each other. I mean, social distancing, I don't think is just going to disappear by July. So there's a lot of questions that have to be made to make this even more possible. You got to get these guys back from Europe at some point. Those guys that come back from Europe, even if they're allowed to come back, are probably going to need to quarantine for 2 weeks. It's an interesting quandary that the league has, but the league seems extremely motivated to have hockey return this summer.
It's going to be fascinating. It's just up to our government to to install some kind of widespread testing so you can find out if somebody's asymptomatic or not. I mean, it's just that simple.
Yep.
And
I will say, the reason why it's very important to have really high-end locker rooms too is, a lot of these locker rooms are already fit with systems that essentially disinfect. It's not just, Rick Bronwell going around spraying all the equipment after games, and after practices, which we see him do every single day. He goes around with a water bottle with disinfectant solution in there and sprays down everything. But they've got these systems in the locker room that essentially we all leave and they pipe up the heat and just, the theory is that it's going to kill everything and dry everything and all that type of stuff. So there are those type of locker rooms as well. So that's another reason why you just can't have, it's kind of what I I think it was on this podcast last week or the week before where I just, I said all along from my sources that North Dakota was never happening. I don't know how that blew up to such a degree, but the league right away, pretty much to me, at least off the record, said that it was just always a BS report, that it was just never, ever happening. It just was impossible to do. They want to be in NHL, just from a technology standpoint, they want to be in NHL arenas because these arenas are outfitted to, deal with everything from goal reviews to concussion protocols to medical stuff to TV hookups, everything.
Absolutely. Cody Upcraft asks, should he drink sunlight or inject cleaner? We value our listeners. We don't recommend either. I will not give a sarcastic answer because I don't want to kill anybody. Let's see. What else do we have? Do you see what was another good topic on Twitter? I just hit the wrong button and blew up all my Twitter mentions.
Let me find your tweet. Zeke Boyat, friend of the show, asks any guesses as to how conditional picks will determine for whenever the draft is. I mean, if they do it in early June, God knows what they're going to do. I mean, there's so many problems with having a draft in June if the season's still going to continue in July. One, there can't be any player trades. I mean, you can't trade Jonas Brodin for William Nylander, but we still have Brodin in the playoffs next month and he'll go to you in October. You just can't do stuff like that. So there'll be no player trades. But then as Zeke points out, from a conditional pick standpoint, you don't know who's making the playoffs or not. So if you have a first round pick with a contingent of making the playoffs, like the Wild have with Pittsburgh, the Wild don't know, or the league doesn't know in June if Pittsburgh's making the playoffs, so they don't know if they can even, give that pick to Minnesota. So, and there's, trust me, of the conditional picks, the Wild Pittsburgh's the easiest to figure out a solution for. There are some that are just super impossible.
From Johnson from Wisconsin, will the Kaprizov signing happen on May 1st, or will they wait until they can do a massive presser?
Well, no. If they agree to terms with them, at some point they're going to sign them here. Hopefully, it's May 1st. I don't even want to envision the tweets and the panic that's going to create it if they just don't announce on Friday of next week that it's a done deal. But it doesn't necessarily happen that day. I mean, the big thing is his agent, who I think I know who it is it's signed up, sealed, and delivered, and all that, where they could just sign the guy. Again, it's a pretty much cut and dry contract where he'll get $925 times 2 with max bonuses. If the Wild are allowed to sign him where he could play right away, shall the NHL start in July? They'll burn the first year, but again, the league has to make that decision at some point. If not, the 2-year deal will start next season. I'll have a big feature on Kaprizov coming up that I know a lot of people want to read. I've been working on it for months, so that's coming up. And then I lost my train of thought. What's the other part of that? The massive presser. I mean, you just can't wait for a massive presser, or we're not going to do it until, we don't know. Even if they sign him on Friday, we just don't even know when the heck he's going to be able to get over here. I mean, right now you can't fly over here. So you
plus you can do both. You can announce it. You can announce it when you want and still have a massive presser. Him coming to America and showing up the X, that's a big deal.
I mean, you could do it via Zoom, but again, his English is, while he's able to text back and forth with Billy Guerin, who knows if he's using Google Translate. I don't know how the Wild plan on dealing that. It's not going to be, my guess is they're going to try to figure out a way where Kaprizov, from a virtual standpoint, is almost going to announce his own deal. But I don't know from an English standpoint how if he's going to be able to actually answer questions to the press. But I'm sure the Wild are going to want to try to figure out a way to excite the fans by getting Kaprizov. Remember when Mikhail Granlund signed his contract in 2012? He sort of announced his signing on wild.com with a video, presentation from him from Finland signing. And so maybe they'll figure out a way to do that with Kaprizov.
Let's do one more question. Thanks to Michael. Thanks to Brandon Morton, our producer. Please listen to everything at Talk North that interests you. Check out talknorth.com, the podcast, the website. Follow us on Twitter at Talk North Pod. But again, the best way to listen, subscribe at your favorite podcast app. From Joe Morenis, I hope I'm getting your name somewhat right. Regarding Big Buff, do you think he's done? Surprised how his career ended? Do you have a favorite story about him? And how many people have asked you about him signing with the Wild? Answer any or all of those.
Repeat that. Sorry, we have actually, believe it or not, we have a Bill Guerin The NHL has a young GM's conference call today, featuring Julian Brisebois, Tampa Bay Lightning GM, who actually interviewed for the Wild job, John Chayka, the Arizona Coyotes, and Kyle Dubas of the Maple Leafs, and Billy Guerin. So I was trying to figure out how the heck to log into it at some point. So I was a little distracted.
Okay, just give me one more minute. We'll let you work from Joe Moranis. It's basically a Big Buff.
Oh, Big Buff. Okay.
Yeah. So just tell me everything you know about him. How
I mean, again, this is one where I'm really hesitant to create any sort of expectations because, my gut on Big Buff is the guy doesn't want to play again. I think he wants to just fish for the rest of his freaking life. I think that if any team's ever going to sign him and he all of a sudden wants to play, he's going to have to do some sort of PR work here to get out ahead of this and explain to people why he essentially quit hockey last year and forced his way out of the Winnipeg Jets. Now, he had a mutual essentially parting of ways with the Jets last week. He apparently left like $14 million on the table, didn't get a cent to leave. And my gut says that Big Buff doesn't exactly love hockey anymore and wants to fish for the rest of his life. Now, if all of a sudden I'm wrong, or he gets a second, like, hey, I really want to play. Obviously, Minnesota, from his standpoint, makes the most sense just because he's from here. Now, the question again, if you're Billy Guerin, is you got to ask the right questions. One, physically, can this guy still play? I mean, if it's the Dustin Byfuglien that we've seen throughout his career in Winnipeg, yeah, I mean, obviously go for it, But if in the last year he's gotten completely out of shape and isn't ready to just step in and start playing, then I think it's a tough decision to make. And then obviously it comes down to what exactly is his contract. I just think that you got to be careful. So, personally, I think it's probably unlikely, but I do think that if there was ever a point where Byfuglien's NHL career was going to continue and he really wanted to play, Minnesota obviously makes the most sense. The question is, does Bill Guerin even have interest? Obviously there's always a spot, right? First of all, I think we all still think that at some point they're going to trade a defenseman. And again, at a minimum is that, on the third spot, they do have a spot for a right D. I mean, Dustin Byfuglien can fit in on the Wild blue line if it's Dustin Byfuglien, but to me, it's a lot in the air and it's hard to assess just because Dustin has not spoken at all publicly since he's, essentially left the NHL. But remember, he's 35 years old, hasn't played in a year, was injured the previous season. God knows what he's been doing the last year. He had surgery, is he fully rehabbed, all that stuff. I mean, this is stuff that he's going to have to answer before I think that any team can look and sit there and say that they're going to sign the guy.
All right, we'll get back to the Google machine. Thanks to Michael. Thanks to everyone who listens. We'll be back next week. As I said on the Roy Smalley show earlier, we are not exactly running out of topics. We are not getting to all the topics I want to get to. So we're still going to have plenty of interesting shows no matter what happens in the hockey world. So once again, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
Pretty little city built on a hillside. Music in the bars and fire in the sky. We went to the beach and it was covered in ice. And I used to call it home. So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world won't forgive a winner.
Since I'm online, I'm going to go Daffy Duck impression. Let's see what this what it could potentially sound like.
All right, I have with me right here the first draft of my new.
Well, that was a Daffy Duck impression on YouTube.